Alrighty, so we got a special podcast today, a conversation with one of the legends of the industry, Jeff Root, who's been doing this longer than I knew what insurance was, and who has an analytical approach to the industry that I think is vastly lacking amongst all the glory statistics posted on social media. There's actual numbers behind it, and sometimes that's what helps us get out of our heads. So, Jeff, appreciate you getting on. Introduce yourself, even though everyone already knows who you are, and then we'll take the next 20, 30 minutes together.
Oh, not everybody knows who I am. Yeah, I'm Jeff Root. I am managing partner at Digital VGA. We run a telesales life insurance agency. We sell final expense and term over the phone since 2016. And yeah, we've been 100% telesales since 2016 and helping independent agents and agencies navigate the business.
Outstanding. Now, I had an agent say today during our training that he had a tough day in the field, went home, and instead of continuing to knock, dial, and work, went back to study his presentation. And I'm of the opinion that there's only so much you can learn studying, and the rest is from doing. But it all kind of comes down to people getting emotional about sales, and they forget that what we're selling is just stuff on a spreadsheet, math, numbers, and actuarial stuff. How do you help or teach or coach, or what does digital do to help people get out of their heads and get a little bit less emotional about the business?
Yeah, the first thing we teach is at its core, this business is just a math problem. And the math problem, like the numbers get better with the activity and your skill sets as they evolve. But at the core, it's a math problem. And you can't solve the problem. You can't do well in this business if you don't have the numbers to track it, the data to track it. And you talked about the agent kind of getting into his head and going to practice his presentation, when really, if he needs to make money, he needs to go make some dials, knock on doors, whatever it is they're doing. I'll say this. I think agents' emotions, they're valid, right? Of course they're valid, but they're not valuable. And that's what I tell agents. They're not valuable. Sales will always have highs and lows. You're always going to feel a certain way. But if you let emotions dictate your strategy, especially on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis, you're going to be riding waves instead of steering a ship. I surf, and the waves don't always break. You know what I mean? So it's really a math business, and for agents who get emotional about it, and most agents are, right? It's just a natural thing. We're not built that way. Like our parents are in school, like nobody taught us business and sales, so it's really out of our comfort zone. So we have these feelings that go along with learning the business. So, if you can turn it into just tracking your numbers, if, you mentioned, guy wouldn't go knock on doors, track your door knocks, track your dials, track whatever it is you're doing, find those key metrics and track them every single day. Then it's almost like gamified. And you can see, I'm not making money, but when you go look at the data, I didn't really do much either. So, I think it all comes down to that. I don't think you can ever remove emotion out of the business. I think you'll always be emotional.
Yeah.
But you can, you can mitigate the emotion, and I think where a lot of agents what they don't do well is they don't track their numbers, and you have to, because this is a math business. It's just a math problem you're solving.
Yeah. One of the things I thought was interesting, because it kind of goes along with the evolution of a new agent who's in that survival state. They're emotional, they're fearful, maybe they're taking action, and then they eventually figure out how to make enough money to pay their bills, then have more money than they've ever had before. I don't feel like in this space, a lot of places teach, now that you're thriving or finally getting ahead, operating as more of a business and then scaling that business. Because I think so much of the MLM space is really just churning through the next round of warm market recruits, that they're really not worried, or the next group of people that go somewhere else for better comp, they're not worried about long-term building of their agents and their agencies. So there isn't a lot of conversation on scale. When you're identifying people that have kind of gotten over the emotion, aren't afraid to work or invest, what do you do to make sure they realize that this isn't just selling anymore, but there's a business that they're building behind it?
Yeah. So the main thing when I see agents do well, a lot of it. So a lot of agents get hot off the bat, right? And then they fizzle out. The longevity is tough because
Hmm.
there's a couple points I want to hit here. The first thing is in the beginning, it's intense. Like you have this intensity about it. You're on fire because you know there's this unknown of money you can make, and so you're going to do as best as you can, right? But the success doesn't come from intensity; it comes from consistency, and it comes from consistency over time. And if you're tracking your numbers and you have that consistency over time, you can see, it's hard to, I would say it's hard to fizzle out if you know that number one, it's all about the consistency. So a lot of agents will work 8 hours in a day and then take the next day off because they made a bunch of sales, right? And you have this like
Yep.
inconsistent, like just way of doing the business. And that's what gets you in a lot of trouble. So the agents that, have success in the beginning, we preach consistency all the time because this business, it should be boring. And a lot of agents can't stand that boring side of the business of saying the same thing every single day, pushing that
Yeah.
dialer button every single day. And it becomes monotonous, even though they're making money, right? It's not as exciting as it once was because they've done it a bunch. They've made a bunch of money. And so, you have to be okay with boring. And boring is really makes you the money in the
Yeah.
business. And where you can, where agents can do better is obviously on the service side of things, like after the sale, and maybe on the marketing side to help it in that regard. But I mean, I see it too. Agents do well, and then they fizzle out because they think they know how to do it, and then they start trying different things. Because that's
Yeah.
another thing. It's not just your activity that's inconsistent. It's like what you're saying. They get too comfortable in the script. They start shortcutting because they have this experience where they think they have the confidence, or I should say the ego to shortcut where they shouldn't be. So that's where I see a lot of fallout for agents that that do well in the beginning.
Yeah. I think that it's important too that, especially if it doesn't come easy for you, that doesn't mean you should give up early either. It just means that some things don't come easy. And then when it does, you're used to hard anyway. I think a lot of times too, for those things that come easy to people, the moment there's adversity, they're not used to that. So then they go getting distracted by something else. The first couple of months,
Yeah,
you're not really facing chargebacks. You're not really facing that, first wave that comes through. And then when they're not used to that, they don't know what to keep doing. I also feel like, especially when you give things time, you don't really get to have an opinion about something big until you've been doing it for 6 months. Like we've seen tons of companies come and go, probably written
yeah,
all of them. And I don't like to have an opinion about them until I've seen 6 months of the cycle, all the way into like the waves of chargebacks, the service side, relationships with the distribution partners. Because it's easy to say, man, this is the best ever, and then find out they draft like terribly, or this is the best ever, but they rescind everything. Like I think 6 months is a good gauge, especially when it starts talking about big or middle-sized projects in this business. What are
yeah,
your thoughts
absolutely.
on like giving it time to realize that you're rushing into an opinion, or that opinion needs more data before you can have it?
So I think everybody needs enough runway to make this business work. If an agent just kind of starts and is giving it 30, 60 days, it's not enough time because the leads you buy now, some of them, you'll get a certain closing percentage. Let's just say you close 7% of your Facebook leads, for example, over the phone. You may close 3.5, 4% over the next 2 weeks, but you might close the other bit over the next couple months with follow-ups and whatnot. So you need that extra time to play out. And it compounds, like this business compounds on itself, right? The
Mhm.
the leads compound, over time. And so the business gets easier as you're more tenured into the business. So yeah, you at least need 6 months to really feel if this business is for you. I mean, you can know right away if you don't have the emotional resilience to make it, or if you don't have the consistency to make it. You'll know that right away. But if you have the consistency and resilience, then yeah, give it at least 6 months because a lot of agents, a lot of agents come to us like the first month. They make a bunch of sales. They think they do great, but it doesn't show in their bank account just yet.
Mhm.
So and so it's tough for them to like this. They're like saying, Jeff, this isn't as profitable as you guys made it out to be. And well, no. Okay, so take a step back here. You worked leads for 3 weeks, and you have this huge pipeline of follow-ups, this huge pipeline of attempted contacts that you haven't monetized yet, where there's money in there. Like you have to see that part of it and let that play out, and that takes some time. I always tell agents, if you break even after your first few weeks, you're doing awesome. Like
Yep.
if the money you spend in leads and the commissions in your bank account equal, like you didn't lose any money after 2-3 weeks, you're doing awesome for
Yeah.
somebody who just started, you know? And so a lot of agents see that as failure though. They don't see how they're going to make that work. Like just give it another month. You're going to make money at least next month because you're already to that break even point and you already understand the process. And just let it take some time because it does take a little bit of time for this to mature. So it's really an expectation thing. We have to set expectations with agents.
Now let's get out of the emotional side of it and talk data. I was never really taught how to track data. There really wasn't a place to aggregate a lot of data when I began. And I remember seeing a recruit who was better looking than me, better talking than me. Like he had all the characteristics of someone that if he went out and talked to old people about dying would write a lot of business. And then at one of the first meetings he was at, he showed me his spreadsheet and it was color coded and organized and all the way down that if Miss Johnson kept her policy and he could tell me in 42 months how much money he was going to be still making off of her. And he was so new, I thought to myself, he's overcomplicating something way too soon. But I still feel like there's some data that needs to be tracked. Otherwise, we're just kind of flying by the seat of our pants. So what data do you think people should be tracking?
So, okay, from the very beginning, you need to track how many leads you take, your closing percentage, your average annual premium, and your placement rate. We call that CAP. Closing rate for C, A for annual premium, and P for placement. And life insurance, those are the three biggest metrics. And then the, I guess, accelerator on that all is how many leads you take. Because if you take your closing percentage times your annual premium times your placement rate, that is the amount of business you place in force per lead taken. So if you're paying $10 for a Facebook lead and you place in force $40, your cap is 40, and you're doing well. And so, but if you can see that and realize, oh, I'm not making a lot of money, but my cap is really good, then I just need to turn up the lead volume.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can just track that, right? How many leads you're taking, closing percentage of those leads, just how many sales, average annual premium, and you have to check your placement rate. And when I say placement rate, I mean placement rate of an actual client, not on a policy. So if you write somebody with, say, Mutual of Omaha, and it gets declined, and you end up going to GTL, that's 100% placement rate. Where it's not you placed that client. And so that's what matters. And that's what I mean by placement rate. Don't look at your carrier placement rates. That's not the real placement rate, is what I'm trying to say, because you pivot a lot. If they decline, you go take them somewhere else. So those are the metrics you need to be looking at, right? And then of course your activity, how many dials you're making, and do that on a daily basis. Or if you're inbound, how many leads you're taking.
Makes sense. What do you think a full day of activity or full week of activity looks like to somebody generating those numbers? Because I still think there's probably some misconceptions that telesales is easier. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to do anything. You don't really have to wear anything. And I don't believe that to be true. So knowing the data and the numbers people need to track, what are other misconceptions that you're seeing still to this day with telesales?
Yeah, a lot of agents, they don't work a full day. They may be full-time in the business, but the revenue producing activities are not a full day of, and that's what I consider a work day. If you've got the guy with the spreadsheet and the colors that you mentioned, like if you're working on that, I don't consider that you're not at work. Don't count those in your hours that you're working. Okay. That's just mental masturbation as far as I'm concerned. Here's what I could do. Yeah.
Yeah.
But with the a full day for a telesales agent, if you do 4 to 5 hours of talk time, you're having a good day. Now that could take somebody 5 hours, 6 hours on the phone. It could take somebody 8 to 9 hours on the phone. It just depends on the leads you're working and how efficient you are with your dialing and your contact rate and all that. But if you can get 4 to 5 hours of talk time every single day, I mean, you're going to get better. And I don't think you can really fail in this business if you can just focus on that activity.
Before we get into our wrap up question, how do I pick my primary company as an individual agent? Got a bonus one for you because I think this is a challenge as the industry evolves and recruiting comes and goes and concepts change. I feel like there's the free lead opportunities out there. There's buying your leads, there's financing your leads, there's W-2, there's so many different ways to do it. But I wonder, and I'm curious of your thought, how much skin in the game does somebody need in that initial learning curve phase? Like my skin in the game is I was an adult. I had bills to pay, kids to feed. Like I was leaving the paramedic realm of life where I needed to continue to make money. So I didn't need a huge why. I had a budget. But there is a certain skin in the game that people need to play it. So what are your thoughts knowing there's jobs and W-2 and LOA and free leads and paid for them and all that stuff that's out there?
When you say skin in the game, are you looking for like a month, like an amount agency to invest? Are you looking for like just the basic, what time you're giving to the business? Or all of it together?
Well, I feel like sometimes free lead programs that I've tried, since they didn't pay for anything, they give up pretty quick. I feel like for some paid opportunities, it cuts out that realm of people that may not be able to upfront $3,000 to get off and sell. But I know there's a minimum, right? $500 or so a week you should be spending on leads. But, what do you feel like is the investment necessary to really give this a fair start? Let's try it that way.
Yeah. So investment wise, I mean, you can look, if you want a good shot at it, you got to put in you have to be willing to invest $5,000 your first month, not total, your first month.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to give you enough leads to keep you busy and be able to do that activity. Could you get by with 2,000 to 3,000? Yeah, you could, but that's only going to last you, 2-3 weeks or so. And I don't, if you're out there, I think you mentioned, minimum $500 a week. I think a lot of agents will kid themselves and shoot themselves in the foot by starting at $500 a week, because that's 10 leads in telesales. I can only speak for telesales. I've actually never set foot in the field. Well, I haven't set foot in the field. I did it for the first 9 months of my business. But after that, I've been all telesales. So if you're only putting $500 a weekend, that's 10 leads a day. If you're getting $10 a lead, right? That is not enough. You could blow through that in 5 minutes of dials, 2 minutes of dials, really. And so it's just not enough. And you need that compounding effect to work. And if you have too much idle time, you're going to get distracted. You're going to start overthinking this business. Like you have to start with, like if you have $2,000, right? If you have a limited budget, just call it $2,000. Spend that in the first 2 weeks. Get it all over with. Feel yourself being so busy. It's better than being idle and thinking and getting in your own head. And that's where agents become emotional. When you're busy and you're taking leads and you have too many leads coming in, that's a good problem to have. Yeah, you can throttle at some point if you need to. But I always say that, I know your initial question was like your initial investment involved.
Yeah.
I would say $5,000. Agents can get started with a couple grand, $2,000-3,000, but don't spread that out over time. Get it over with. And I know agents want to just like dip their toe in the water, get a little bit of training, some practice presentations, but no, that's what your uplinks for. You train with them, you role play with them, and then you go. It's not there. You just have to perform.
Well said. In our final 9 or 10 minutes or so, let's talk about how do I, as an individual agent, pick the primary company I'm going to lead with without being specific about a particular carrier, because they really just come and go and changes happen pretty consistently. I feel like when I was at my peak as a personal producer with no agency responsibilities, I had my go-to. I had one that made up for what the other didn't do good. And I very rarely pivoted to like a third or a fourth. And I feel like that's an effective way for agents to run their business. But what are the characteristics of that core company an agent should be looking for?
So I can only speak to telesales. So I will say number one, process, not rates. A lot of agents will go, I want to get the one that's the best rates, right? No, process. You want to be able to handle it efficiently, and you want your client to be able to handle the application efficiently. If it doesn't have a good sales process or application process, I should say, then then move on to something else. So number one, process. Number two, has to have social security billing. Number three, they have to have good customer service. And
Hmm.
I never even really put that in my top. Like I wouldn't mention that a couple of years ago. The customer service has just been getting horrendous at a lot of carriers lately. Like absolutely horrendous. It's like
Oh
they
my
don't
God.
care.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so now I've moved that up because that does matter. When you get, pending lapse notice, you want to make sure you can fix that without having to wait for 45 minutes on the phone to just get a hold of somebody.
Yeah.
So I would factor, if it has a good process, social security billing, and they've been around a while, then I'd feel comfortable with any of those types of carriers. A lot of agents also like the carriers with the membership benefits and things like that. I've never sold on that, but I could see that working as well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because products do come and go, but I've learned that new entries to the market sometimes need 2 years before they know what they're doing. When you
Yeah,
already know what to do, it's already out there. You just have to kind of copy concepts and softwares and stuff, but they still need a 2-year runway to figure out what's social security billing and how do we have enough hierarchies and how do we pay people and how do we make sure we're not contracting criminals? Like you'd be surprised. It's surprising when you get to a certain mid-level of the hierarchy or in your position at the top. Whoa, let's slow down. Let them figure themselves out before we, put our,
yeah.
realm, our distribution with them too. Are there any other words of wisdom you would give someone that say they're struggling to telesales, they want to make it work, their spouse might be saying it's time to go back and get a job, but maybe a word of advice before they give up what they should be doing in the coming days and week ahead?
So for the struggling agents, I mean, if you it depends. It really depends on the situation, but I'll generalize here and say that I'll circle back to the very beginning. This is a math problem. If you look at it as a math problem, and you know the numbers, you see the numbers and how they work, and you have that pro forma, that sort of plan with your numbers. Okay, if I buy X amount of leads and my closing percentage is just average, and my placement rate is just average, this is what I should be making. And you have to go through that exercise. And if you go through that exercise with just the averages, then and you can see that you can make a livable income, then it's an agent problem, not the business problem.
Mm-hmm.
Because that it just takes the activity and the skill sets. Look, you may not be closing at a high clip because you think that having a script in your hand is going to navigate you to making all these sales. It's not. You really have to practice. You really need to listen to other people's calls, to your calls, and to understand all that's going on underneath the conversation and get a feel and an intuition for every phone call. If you don't have that yet, that's because you haven't practiced enough. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's a big piece. So if you have that plan, like okay, and that's what we do with agents, right? We put them on a plan, we get them to agree to it. Okay, you only have $3,000, $5,000, whatever it is, and you need to make X amount. Okay, well let's be realistic. You're not going to profit 10 grand a month with $3,000 of ad spend at the very
Mm-hmm.
beginning, right? It won't happen. So if you have that plan and your averages in your agency are saying that it will work out and that agent is not making it work, they're struggling in the business, there is something. You should know your weaknesses in the business. If you don't know your weaknesses in the business, then you never put together a proper plan. You weren't trained properly. And I find a lot of agents just weren't trained properly and weren't given that sort of expectation. So, and really when agents are struggling, it's a lack of commitment. It's really a lack of commitment and consistency, whether it's just buying leads or whether, or whatever. And a lot of people, and a lot of agents, self-confidence issues, and they're just not cut out for it, and not everybody's cut out for this.
Nope.
So, and some agents just need to be honest with themselves, and if they're struggling and it's really, they just can't do the activity required, go work on yourself for a little bit and then come back to the business, because that's a mindset thing. That's a you thing, not a business thing. So, I would say if you're struggling, make sure you have that plan, know your numbers. And if your numbers aren't matching up, you'll know what your weaknesses are. If it's close rate, placement, just taking enough leads, and you'll know. And then you can fit. And once you know, I think that gives agents confidence. Like, okay, this is all I need to do. And a struggling agent can get that light bulb moment.
Yeah, this is really a you versus you battle. Understand the data and the numbers behind battling it with yourself, but realize you're in full control of the outcome. You just have a great attitude, put in the activity necessary, have a system where someone's giving you the what to do, and then just go do it. So, Jeff, I appreciate you taking the time today to share your insights, your experience, and your time with those that have watched. If you are watched and you're here to the end, comment, like, subscribe, engage, and interact with the content, and share it with others, because you just got 26 minutes of free information from someone who's been doing this longer than most will ever in this industry. Jeff, thank you.
I appreciate it, Chris.